Good morning and welcome to another episode of Industry 4.0 in Focus, Automation Alley's weekly virtual event series dedicated to the fourth industrial revolution. Each week, we are taking a deep dive into topics covered in our 2020 Technology and Industry Report. This week's topic is manufacturing transformed with 5G. Hi, I'm Cynthia Hutchison, Automation Alley's Vice President, and I'm sitting in today for our CEO, Tom Kelly. He actually had the audacity to take a vacation. I'm pleased to be joined today by Benjamin Ortiz of Verizon for our discussion on how 5G is revolutionizing the manufacturing industry. Welcome, Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Before we start, I would like to mention that Automation Alley members have access to our 2020 report for free by logging into our member portal at automationalley.com and clicking on the resource tab. Now, if you would like to ask a question on today's live stream, please use the Q&A function below. I think it's still below on your screen. Screens have changed a little bit. You'll find it. Benjamin, we know that Industry 4.0 and IoT connected devices are optimizing factories, streamlining processes, and they're truly reinventing the production of goods. But a revolution is needed on the network side too. So talk to us about the impact that 5G is going to have on the manufacturing industry.
So, 5G is, and I've been studying this for a year now, or a couple of years now since I've been with Verizon. It is going to be kind of, as you had mentioned earlier, kind of bring in the fourth industrial revolution. And not only will it affect manufacturing, but it'll affect all the way we live and how we communicate, especially with the real-time efforts that it'll bring in, real-time environments that it'll bring in. It'll just collect a lot of data, and you'll be able to take all that data, summarize it, and make quick decisions using your AI or your machine learning. And so there's a lot of things that are going to go on in the manufacturing space. You'll have mobile robots or automated guided vehicles going through the plant floors, delivering inventory and parts where they're needed at the right time. You'll have asset tracking. You'll have augmented reality on the floor so that people can see the quality and train their employees. And I think what 5G will do is it'll just make manufacturing more flexible as you go along. It'll improve worker safety. You'll have better quality products, and you'll have better design. And I know that in an article I read a couple weeks ago in the Detroit News about Ford has the Ford robotic dog that's going around their factories now, taking planning out where everything is so that they can quickly move things. So it has its own handler now, kind of like what you have with drones. Then in the future, you'll just have an automated vehicle kind of ride around and take all those pictures and all those dimensions. And so that, the intent there is for the Ford plant to quickly shift as they bring out new products and new models. And so you'll see a lot of that. So manufacturing will go from a very static and planned thing to a very quick and responsive type of environment in the future with 5G.
Interesting. So, for people who don't know, maybe everybody does know but me, but we've all had like 3G and 4G. There's some seismic change between where we are and 5G. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so 3G, 4G is kind of like, small steps forward. So I've been through both of those launches, especially 4G. And 5G will take it another step forward. Actually, as my CEO says, it'll be a quantum leap forward because you will start out with gigabit type of speeds to your device. So, your handheld, and you'll see that later this year as you get into new phones. And so it's great speed, but it also comes with great latency. And so when you start to combine speed and latency, and then the other thing that we'll bring in is we'll bring the cloud closer to the endpoints, and all of a sudden your latency will drop, and all of a sudden you'll have this real-time thing. So you'll collect data, devices will collect data, and it'll take it up to the cloud, which is closer to you, closer to the devices, and then you'll start to make decisions quicker. Your programs and your applications will make decisions quicker, almost real time, so that as you're on the manufacturing floor, a robot can deliver a part to you, and at the same time, we can time it so that when I turn around and get ready to put it on, the robot hands it to me, I put it on the car or whatever I'm making, back and go back and forth. And then it'll always be continuous type of information taken so that, the inventory is always right. I'm always moving, or something's always moving and always doing things. And then the other part about it too is we'll be able to take augmented reality and video surveillance of the the product as it goes through to see if there's any defects, what kind of quality, and all of a sudden we'll have better quality products, and we can make all of those decisions real time. So if we see a process that isn't right or a defect on a part, we can make that change. We can make that design change and make that very quickly on the plant floor. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen. So
the latency is an interesting component of that. Thank you. That's just a word I'll remember forever tied to that. It's not just the speed, but the latency.
Right.
So in an earlier episode of this series, we talked about 5G and how it would bring multi-edge computing. Can you briefly touch on the access of multi-access edge computing?
Sure. So multi-access computing says, and we just launched this in Boston and San Francisco 2 weeks ago. We partnered with AWS, Amazon Cloud Web Services. And so what we're doing is we're taking part of their cloud and we're actually putting it in the Verizon network close to where your cell phones communicate to our network. Right there is going to be a box, if you can picture that, that's the cloud. So as the devices talk to the cell towers will turn around and immediately talk to the server or the cloud as it sits there in our network. And so we can have different applications running up there. And the nice thing about that is we like to say that you're going to have a cloud in your pocket because, you know, your cell phone's in your pocket or wherever you keep it, you have the cloud in your pocket. So we'll have developers develop applications to that. We'll have private parts of the cloud there so that manufacturing companies can build their own apps and hit that part of the cloud. It's kind of segmented from the public cloud that we'll have there. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen there. And we've opened that up to developers. And so developers can now submit ideas and put their applications out there, kind of like what we see today with, you know, Google Play Store or, you know, the App Store through Apple. So there'll be a lot of different applications out there. There'll be applications in your pocket that we haven't even thought about. So as everybody always says, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we never thought about Airbnb or Uber. So in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll go turn around and go, I never thought we could do that with our phone and do it so quickly. So it's going to be very exciting for all of us. And it's really, when you combine 5G, the speeds, and then you combine the MEC that's closer to it, then all of a sudden you have real-time environments and real-time decision-making.
Thank you. And in what way will the multi-access edge computing be a game changer for manufacturers?
So again, as I said, manufacturing companies can develop their own applications, house them in the cloud, and then all of those IoT device sensors will talk to the cell site they're close to, or the in-building site close to the manufacturing floor, and then it'll turn around and it'll talk to the cloud. So there's no more, I have to go way over here across the country to talk to my application. It's right there. And then once it's there, it can compute all of that and then disseminate the information back down so that either the program or the application can make the decision or put it on somebody's dashboard so they can see what's going on. So decisions will be made in real time. And what's interesting about this is with the latency and the way 5G is and how many devices you can have in one spot, you have what they call continuous information coming at you. Because currently with like 4G, you get every minute or every 2 minutes or every 5 minutes, you get, you know, the status of where the location is. With 5G and the MEC being close, you get continuous information. And you'll also go from 4G says, you know, the spec says it, you know, we'll tell you the location within 10 meters. Now with 5G, you'll get down to 2 to 3 centimeters of where something is. So you'll get very precise locations as to where everything is. So we'll know where each part is. We'll know where each person is if we're tracking our people. We'll know where the product is. We'll know where everything is at all times and as it moves along. And so that'll be kind of the driver towards autonomous vehicles. And I was out at M-City last year watching a test car ride with 5G with the MEC there and make turns and stop. And as they simulated some of the real-time traffic, it was quite fascinating to watch.
So this real time that you've alluded to in manufacturing a couple of times, because to a robot or a cobot, essentially knowing what you're doing and being able to pivot, turn around, and take the next part. that real time is going to be a critical component for everything that's moving forward, particularly for the autonomous vehicle, because I often think about that with the autonomous vehicle. We do so many things now where we hear about it's just around the corner. And then every now and again, I'm thinking, well, particularly when I drive to Canada, as soon as I hit the border, my phone drops off and I have to get a new phone. So, you got to re-accept. I'm thinking, well, if I'm driving and my car is driving itself, that little drop-off thing, that can't keep happening.
so, so people smarter than me are working on that part of it. But yeah, you're right about that. So, they'll launch their 5G. We'll just see how the handoff goes as we go along.
Yeah. I think I'm sure we'll get all that done before I'm behind the wheel on it. But I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting. I love the test tracks too. So the big question is always, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, is when. When will 5G become a reality for us across the globe? But we'll start with across the state of Michigan, across the country. You mentioned pieces you've rolled out in Boston and San Francisco. When can we expect to really see this be universal?
So that's a really big question, by the way. In my experience, there's a lot of factors that go on with that. So there's the frequency or the spectrum that we all need, especially carriers like us that need. So, my competition, AT&T, Sprint of the world, T-Mobile's, you've seen them kind of roll this out now. And so we're all trying to roll this out, and we are doing our best and in making sure that we're redoing some towers, placing new towers up. And so there's a lot of negotiation with municipalities where we can put towers up and where we can put the big macro towers up or the small cells up. And so a lot of that has to happen. And then as a carrier, especially with Verizon, we are, providing fiber to each of our cell sites to carry and carry all of that bandwidth. So you can go 1 gig from your phone to the cell tower, but if the cell tower goes from the cell tower to the cloud or wherever you need to go on the internet, and it's slower than 1 gig, there's going to be a bottleneck. So we all have to kind of put together our backbones together to make sure that everything runs through the same speed and same type of latency that we all project to our customers. And so there's a lot of that. I know that also I've read that some of the like Bosch, BMW, and VW, Volkswagen, have petitioned the German government for spectrum to put 5G private spectrum, put a private 5G network in all of their manufacturing facilities in Germany. So they have to go through that, and then they have to decide, like most manufacturers do I do a private or do I share with a carrier? And then the other part of that becomes, how do we do in-building inside? So am I going to do millimeter wavelength inside the building, or am I going to do the sub-6 inside the building in terms of frequencies? And so what's the best play there? I know that Corning and Qualcomm are providing or developing some type of in-building for millimeter wavelength for, kind of to work on the Verizon, Vodafone networks and Orange networks. And then there's a company in South Korea that is kind of doing, can we rebroadcast? Can I take the 5G signal from outside and then rebroadcast it inside? So there's a lot of technical challenges that go on there in terms of when it's going to roll out. And I think, in the next couple of years, we will see great leaps in that. And then what will the cost be for not only the carriers, but for manufacturing? So I think it's still a couple of years out, but it'll kind of trickle out as this technology kind of does.
And one of the things you allude to, you and I talked before we started here about, I have a history. I worked with Sprint once upon when we were laying fiber across the country. And, with the last mile, no matter how much fiber you had, if you came into some cable that didn't work and wasn't fiber, you didn't have fiber end to end until you paid for the last mile.
That's right.
So we're still going to see some of that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Corning, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about your partnership, Verizon's partnership with Corning, and what were you able to accomplish through that?
So that it's two parts. So the first part was we signed an agreement 3 years ago with them to purchase $1 billion worth of fiber to lay in the United States. So we bought that. We're coming to the end of that agreement now. And then the other part of it is we also took one of their manufacturing facilities in North Carolina, and we put in private 5G there. So for them to test out the mobile robots or the automated guided vehicles, some condition-based maintenance, and and asset tracking so that we could see what they were and what comes out of those. And so we are still working through a lot of that and still compiling our findings about what's working for them and what's not. So that's kind of our relationship with Corning now, and they're still a very good partner of ours. And as I mentioned earlier, they're also helping develop in-building solutions for 5G.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other benefits that 5G has. How does 5G enable asset tracking?
So asset tracking currently, as it stands now, is, you can use a QR code, you can use RFID, and you can just send somebody out and count. So there's a little bit of that too. So those type of those technologies there are, you can do those on 4G today. So I have a company, a partner that I work with that does RFID inside of manufacturing facilities, kind of like their bumpers and the panels of the cars, because they come in big containers and they can RFID those. And what they've done is they set up beacons all over the manufacturing plant so that when those big pieces of equipment or pieces of the car parts move, they can tell where it is in the manufacturing facility. So that saves them a lot of money. So the difference becomes with 5G is we put a 5G sensor on it. And as I said earlier, you start to get this continuous cycle of I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And it's good within, 2 to 3 centimeters or, a very close rate. And with 4G now, you kind of get the part is in this area or it's in this part of the plant. You don't know exactly where it is. But with 5G, you'll get exactly where it is and you can kind of watch it move along. And then you can kind of plan where it's going to be, how much you need, how fast it's moving, how fast you're taking it from inventory to the manufacturing line, and those parts are so that you can help all of kind of your supply chain also. So that's what will happen, and it'll 5G will work, as I said earlier, with the MEC and your applications there. And so whatever application you have overall, I think IBM has something called Maximo that they use to do this for Industry 4.0. So that could sit in the cloud and take all of that information in and help you process that and make better decisions.
Thank you. Now, when you talk about the factory, does 5G impact factory maintenance along that same real-time, quick asset following? How does that factor into the factory maintenance?
Yes. So there are two parts of factory maintenance. So there is condition-based maintenance, and then there's preventive maintenance. And so, condition-based maintenance says, hey, if the device or the machine gets to a certain level, certain threshold, let's say it gets too hot or too many rotations, we need to kind of replace the parts, and that all goes along with preventative maintenance. But it'll allow us to kind of real-time look at the machines, monitor the machine to make sure that it's running optimally. And then if it gets to a threshold or if it starts to slow down, we can tell those things right away before it actually breaks down. And then manufacturers will be able to plan for downtime as opposed to an unexpected downtime, which costs lots of money. The manufacturers lots of money. You can now plan for it. You can say, we're going to take it down, maybe, one of your night shifts or whatever shift you think is appropriate. You can take down, make the maintenance up and running again. And so it'll give you that continuous update of what the health of your machines and when they need a checkup, for lack of a better term analogy there. It's just kind of a checkup.
You're going to be able to be continually proactive without somebody having to walk the plant to do it. So your machines are going to automatically report, I'm 10 hours away from needing service. You might want to schedule it during lunchtime.
Yes, that's right.
That's going to be really, really helpful from a financial standpoint for everybody. I'm going to take a break and go to a question that's out here because it applies to something you just talked about. So what are the advantages of private versus public cloud for edge computing?
So private says, and as you work with, in my experiences, I've worked with some large manufacturing and some of the OEMs, automotive OEMs, is they like to keep their applications secure and their own because they develop them themselves. And so they don't need those kind of things on the public side. And so they just want their devices to talk to it and their devices to provide that information to their to their app. So that would kind of be the private side of it. And then they can tweak it and they can build their app the way they want to. And then on the public side, you probably have more, maybe more consumer, just more kind of generic. So how do we do video surveillance? And if there's nothing special that you need there, you can just use one of those, the public ones. It depends on kind of the company and how they view their data. If they view if they have homegrown, so a lot of these companies have homegrown applications to run their manufacturing facility, or some of them do. They can put it on a private cloud. They can manage that, and they can make the changes themselves to their application as they go forward, as opposed to putting it on a public cloud where it's kind of, everybody's got access to it. I can use it and I can install it and use it, and there's not a lot of customizable, there's not a lot of custom work that can be done there.
Thank you. So we've all heard that 5G's improved bandwidth is going to enable more advanced technology on the floor. And you've given me a couple examples already, such as mobile robots. But how about AR and VR in a factory setting? Because I think those are, we're going to see, we'll talk about that, then we'll go on to the training aspect of that. But what are you seeing with AR, VR, and how does this impact that?
So AR and VR kind of give us the ability to do a couple things. One is quality. We talked about, and you asked about quality of products earlier. So the ability to do what they call twin images. So the actual product or part, and then a twin image of it.
Like a digital twin.
Yeah, so virtually, so you can see, so workers on the floor can see what it's supposed to be like. And then the other part of that too is, if you think about it, then I can guide the worker through how to do some task on the line. So you can give them step by step, or you can virtually say, hey, you need to touch this button, do this here, tweak this there, and virtually do that. So, and the nice thing about that is, if a worker that was doing that for a while calls in sick or takes a vacation, you can quickly put somebody else in to substitute in for them and quickly train them up on how to do that. So then everything is a little bit more consistent. And so we see a little bit of that in terms of training for the employees, and then also for design work. So I know that Ford is doing something they call Five. So they've already got a augmented reality design studio where they just have a driver's seat and a steering wheel, and then you put on the goggles and you can see the model of cars before they even build the car or even make a clay model of it. They've already got it kind of in augmented reality. And so if you take that and you move that to the manufacturing floor for the autos, all of a sudden you can pretty much see what the part is supposed to be like, how it's supposed to go in there, and how to do that. So how to manufacture it, how to install it, and to make sure it's right. So there's a whole world of possibilities out there already, and people are kind of touching on the edges of it now.
Wonderful. And we've got a couple more things before we go to other people's questions. How will 5G impact the supply chain from quality and logistics standpoint?
Yeah, and so again, with asset tracking or asset management, the ability to have continuous information of where everything is. And so if I'm a supplier to one of the auto OEMs, I'll have visibility, and they'll have visibility into the part that I make. Let's just say it's the car door. I can say, hey, here it is. Here's the tracking, and we can all kind of watch it come in and shipped and be made over there, and then arrive at our assembly plant in inventory, and then watch it go to be put on the car. And so that type of supply chain will allow us to be a little bit more predictable. So we'll know how much we need, and the things that I've read and kind of talked about with some customers is, so just in time inventory will be more of a reality because we'll have better predictability around it. So, kind of taking something that we have already kind of do and just making it better because of the continuous real-time type of information we're going to have. We can tell when the part was made, when it's in transit, when it was delivered, when it was, moved to the manufacturing line, when it was put on the car, and out it goes.
It's fascinating. We think so much of automotive here. I've met with some fashion manufacturers recently, the apparel industry, and they're doing very similar, very much just in time, which is an interesting, we expect it in our manufacturing, in our traditional, the metal manufacturing, we think about here in Michigan, but it's interesting to have the apparel manufacturing industry talk about printing fabrics on the fly in the factory to comply with a unique customer need. So I
Yes.
think we are going to see that everywhere. That technology is going to be completely pervasive.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that 5G will do for us there, just to point that out, is, in the fashion industry or even in the the car industry, you can take all the information, all that marketing information you're going to get through 5G from everybody, all the consumers, and you can pivot very quickly in terms of getting on a new trend or a new style or whatever it is, and pivot very quickly with your design, as you mentioned there, and all of a sudden produce products that people want.
That would be nice. Scott has asked us, since 5G sounds like kind of a big guy solution for the OEMs and tier ones, what about the small to mid-sized manufacturers? How do they participate in this?
And so that's always a good question. Yes, and it does sound like it's for the big guys, but you know what I would say there is, how do we participate in it? Is how we all should probably participate in it. We start to do the things now that we can do in 4G. So as I mentioned earlier, you can do asset tracking and condition-based maintenance today with some of the solutions that we have that are out there now. So kind of move to those, kind of start to think about and embracing kind of the move to the cloud in terms of where your applications are. And then you can kind of start to do that today. And then when you're ready and when the cost is right and when the application is right, you can start to move to 5G when you're ready. Because, and I was in last December, before all of this happened, I was giving a presentation to construction folks, and they asked me a similar type of question: how do we embrace these changes? And there's one part is the technology part. So you start to move to 4G and use the cloud, and then the other part of it is, how do you get your employees to move to that? So, having a culture of technology change and embracing wireless and getting folks to use wireless in the applications that they use for their business also helps them, so that your whole company can move in that direction. And then you'll have everything done in 4G. 4G is going to be around for a while. 4G will also be able to access the MEC, so there'll be some little bit lower latency there too in our 4G applications, and so those will work faster. And then you can kind of move to 5G as you need to, as you feel you need to, and then based on costs and everything else that happens with making those decisions, you can slowly move to 5G while kind of still having some things in 4G and 3G or 4G that you have now. That would be my guess. That would be my advice.
Thank you. And then we've got from Jamie, with 5G and you referenced cloud in the pocket, does that mean we can begin to make the end devices like our computers and phones? Jamie says dumber and cheaper, but we don't have to worry about our phones being so dang smart. Can we allow that smartness to live in the cloud, or will we continue to have it on our physical devices?
So I believe that is my opinion. That is, and I agree with, was it Jamie? I agree with them. So how do we make them less smart? And so what 5G does, though, is because we've moved the cloud and put it in, per se, your pocket, your device, as Jamie mentioned, your device doesn't have to have the processing power to, do all of those processes that they would do here. It'll be done in the cloud closer to you with better latency. So so the devices can do something else. What that something else is, I don't know. Like, we can probably ask Apple and Google and Samsung what those devices will do other than the processing power. So
if I were a betting woman, somehow they'd still find a way to make them smarter so that we would spend more money for them.
Yes. But by moving everything into the cloud too. So Jamie, the other thing it'll do, besides potentially make them less smart, is energy efficiency. So they're not going to use as much energy. So your battery life will go longer. So as you talk about asset tracking, a lot of those sensors, because they're not doing a lot of computing at the sensor level or on the device, tracking it, it's just sending the information up to the cloud. The battery life gets longer. So you'll see that too with your devices. So you have to take a less smarter devices to last a little longer, but get the same type of output on it, and you interact with it the same way. I think that's a pretty good trade-off.
Good trade-off. And I've got time for one more question, which is, will RFID become the endpoint in 5G in terms of asset and parts tracking? We're putting you on the spot for things you don't have to really know an answer about. We're asking.
I think it'll start out that way. And then I think somebody will develop something that's even better than that. So that's my thought. And again, when we get there, we'll go, oh, RFID was great, but this is even better.
And I'm going to ask you, before we go, lastly, one thing, you've already touched on this a little bit. How can companies prepare for coming to 5G? What considerations should they be taking now to make sure that they're not left behind? And I know you captured most of that, but give us a quick summary on that.
Yeah, so, kind of start to embrace some of the wireless applications that are out there. I've got companies now that we're starting that journey. Start even starting with as simple as wireless backup for your internet service. And, that's the first thing, because then you can transition to 5G if you need to later on when it comes out. And also take some of your applications and start to look at the cloud and see what you can put there in the cloud, and your thoughts around that. And then the last part I'll leave you with is start to cultivate a culture of technology change and electronic forms through your company, so that your employees will also embrace the change as it comes. And so if they start to embrace it, the technology works better and all of your applications work better. So there's still a human element to this, Cynthia.
Thank you. We speak a lot, you're speaking our language at Automation. We talk a lot about culture transformation needs to lead the technology transformation. No matter how great the technology is, if you have a resistive culture, it's just so much harder to make it happen.
Yep.
So finally, I want to thank you for joining us this morning, Benjamin. Thanks for some real-time, real working examples, because that's always makes people understand things more. And for our viewers today, please join us next week, as we will be joined by OPS Solutions for discussion about augmented reality and their light guided work instructions. Thank you, everybody. Have